Really, really cool stuff to say. And so we'll get started here. So hi, Peter. How are you?
I'm doing well, Mark. Thanks for having me here.
Of course, yeah. Really grateful for your time and attention today. It's very generous for you to share your thoughts around solar project management with our students here. Why don't you tell me a little bit about, or tell us a little bit about your background from a professional perspective, what you do at Penn State and how you're involved there.
Sure. So I work at Penn State Sustainability Institute. We are a team of about 14 people who are tasked with integrating and institutionalizing sustainability across all of the functions of a university. So, a university, a Research One university like Penn State, which has 100,000 students, when you include the 15,000 online students, the 85,000 in-person students, thousands of faculty and staff. We have over 20 locations, not including the extension offices. It's a huge place. So it's no small task to bring sustainability into research, teaching, student life, outreach, operations, and administration. Okay, with 14 people. Mostly what I do is I work with faculty like yourself to bring sustainability into the classroom in one way or another. So part of what I do is I might do something kind of like what we're doing here today. I could be interviewed or give a guest lecture or handle a unit. And those can be in really anything. So I've done work with the Palmer Museum of Art. For public outreach and course engagement around the Plastic Entanglements exhibition.
Okay.
But then I also do things like I help design courses like the ethics of climate change. Where I'm working with meteorologists, a religious studies professor who is a scholar of Muslim, and Islamic history, and then an environmental philosopher. Right. So I have to kind of work with anybody. That's my task.
Right.
My background educationally, though, I have 2 degrees in music and a minor in creative writing. So you'd be like, well, how does that work? But in the mid 2000s, there was a court case in Pennsylvania called Kitzmiller v. Dover, where a group of parents took a school board to court for the violation of the First Amendment's Establishment Clause of religion. It was because this school board wanted to incorporate intelligent design, creationism into a science class and thereby entangle religion with science. It was a really interesting court case. I went to it, but what I discovered in covering it for a paper and being a kind of obsessive person was that the people who were attacking the science of evolution, which we can agree or disagree about, and it's not going to like rip apart public policy or cause like global calamity. These same people were also attacking the science of climate change and the education of children about the science and potential action for climate change. And in a democracy where an educational system is at least nominally intended to support democratic decision-making, this is just a huge problem. So I got into what I do at the Sustainability Institute because I'm really I worry about and am just kind of charged up to make sure that our educational systems are well informed so that our democracy can be well informed so that we can take on a challenge like climate change. One of the ways that we can do that is through the support of the adoption, the responsible, nature-smart, socially aware, healthful adoption of technologies like solar power. So that's kind of like how I got into where I am. And so I've been in local government, regional government. I ran for the State House of Representatives last year, and I work at Penn State, and a fair amount of what I do is around solar.
Right. Excellent. So what are some of the projects that you've worked on in your roles at Penn State or in government?
So let's see. At Penn State, I was part of a team that worked on what ended up being the Light Source BP solar power purchase agreement.
Okay.
So I was appointed to that team in large part because of my work in local government, and then my collaboration with teaching and research faculty who work in solar.
Okay.
So I brought the Nature Conservancy to the table for that, and we used the mapping tool for Connected and Resilient Habitat to help prioritize our sites, because we wanted to make sure that we weren't going to disrupt migratory pathways, say for birds and mammals, et cetera, or site things on, brownfields or, that had already been damaged. And so there could be reclamation work. Being a part of that was just awesome. Up until Governor Wolf announced the 191 megawatt projects for the state government.
Right.
Penn State had the largest solar project. It's actually 3 distinct, solar farms all pulled together for about 103 million kilowatt hours of electricity a year. 25% of our purchased electricity, and reduces our greenhouse gas footprint by 14 to 15% annually, which is pretty huge.
It is.
Smaller scale projects, I wrote the basis of design document for a LEED Gold Public Works facility in Ferguson Township, which is being fitted with solar right now, and that's the standard kind of, for those of you who might be interested in building design and things like that. We oriented the building due south, which put it slightly off kilter to the road, which some residents were like, why are you doing this? And we're like, because solar. And they were like, oh, cool. And there was one guy who was like, well, that just doesn't look right. And we were like, yeah. Another generation. I also work on the Regional Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, which is meant to incentivize or bolster solar in a number of ways. And then I also chair, and this is one of my favorite projects of all time, probably. I chair an intergovernmental solar power purchase agreement working group. So there are 15 distinct local government entities that are cooperating to pursue potentially 100% solar power through those 15 groups. So it's 6 municipalities, 6 authorities, 1 council of governments that brings planning and a park authority, et cetera, together, a county government, Center County government, and then the State College Area School District, which has an operating budget of $170 million, 660 faculty, about 7,000 students. So altogether, that's about 32.5 million kilowatt hours of electricity. And so I'm not on the technical side of site design or anything like that. I'm the sort of driving human behind the coalition of off-takers. And so having my acquaintance with the other side, the developer side, the engineering side, permitting side, site selection side, and then understanding what I've done before in government and at the university, I can bring those together and just be a kind of a human, a sewing machine, to just sort of stitch all these different things together and hold us together and maybe get a really great Pennsylvania-based project out of it.
Excellent. Can you, either in the chat or after we get off the call here, share maybe some links to the Penn State Light Source BP Nature Conservancy one, and I think there was another one, the Ferguson. If you could share links to those, that would be great for our students to see them and see the work that you've done there from a project perspective. I think it'd be very, very relevant as they put their projects together to have some linkage to that.
Sure, and I can I might need a reminder, but I'd be happy to share that. And
then we'll put it right after the interview in sort of the show notes. They can go and get that stuff and pick it up. So that'd be very, very helpful. What are the most important aspects of project management and stakeholder management that our students should pay attention to as they begin to build their project plans?
Yeah, well, I'm really glad that those things are put together. Mm-hmm. Because really often in engineering education and then engineering execution, the quote unquote technical side of things, right? I'm an engineer, I focus on this. And the human beings are flushed out of the system, and then you show up and, people are people and they want to be treated well and not like a widget, right? So, it's really important that your project and your stakeholders really be understood together. And, I like to come to the table with dignity as a kind of foundational value. So I think that when you both as an individual and part of a team of, say, engineers or whatever it is, your finance, all the people who you might be working with, holding a common value like dignity is really, really important. Mm-hmm. Then in the project and the stakeholder engagement, the values really need to be articulated. Mm-hmm. And there are processes that can help you do this. Integrated design, which is a requirement in LEED Gold and Platinum, for example, that's really helpful. You start with your values. You don't start with the widget. Right. Don't start with the widget. Because if you do that, it just becomes instrumental. It can be very alienating, and to be very philosophical about it, it separates us from ourselves. Right. And we're all whole human beings who need to be whole human beings and treat other people as whole human beings. And so please do that. Right. So when you articulate the values beyond profit and efficiency, those should be foundational and everything should flow from them. From there, you can attend to people, mm-hmm. the process, and make sure that your values flow through there. And then it's absolutely imperative that you as a project management team, stakeholder engagement team, are committed to finding and learning from good information. Mm-hmm. That's absolutely critical. And this isn't just, things about, your interconnection or whatever. It's doing your best to understand even things like the personalities on a zoning hearing board, right? Because those things can matter more. Yes. Than the interconnection cost. Interconnection cost, you go and you figure it out and you're like, okay, cool. Meanwhile, Jeb Ryan and Laura, I don't know, pick a last name, they are at such loggerheads, right, that they can wreak havoc on a planning commission. Right. And that's a little bit of an extreme example, but these kinds of things happen. I've seen it in local government where a developer or someone can sort of set something off. Mm-hmm. And you can't control other people, right? Yep. And you have to, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, and the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? And so approaching that in your project management can be really helpful. Right. Then, your actions and the procedures for your stakeholder engagement, they need to be fair. Right. They need to be thorough. Mm-hmm. And they are also going to have to be efficient. Most of the people here are going to go work for a for-profit institution. Mm-hmm.
And if you work for government, there might be increased requirements for thoroughness, right? Yep. You're going to be in a balancing act between those all the time. It'll be frustrating, and sometimes it'll also be thrilling, but you need to hold on to those things as you proceed. And then I guess the last thing I would say is that we need to have repeated attempts at engagement. Mm-hmm. Because in the rush to do things, it's easy to leave people out, unintentionally.
Right.
And if we get too focused on just getting the project done, we'll run people over. And what happens then is you either get an immediate backlash, or that turns into a tendency in the organization that leads to a reputation out there that will block you.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
My advisor said to me, I have never regretted being kind.
Right.
And kind is usually not terribly fast.
Right.
Doesn't mean that it can't be nimble or even move fairly quickly. But if you rush, you will hurt yourself and other people and, and your organization. So, and that all goes back in a loop to your values.
Right, right, exactly. One of the things that we emphasize in the curriculum in stakeholder engagement in particular is the term empathy, and what is the requirement for empathy for our project managers as they walk through each of these steps and work out, putting their stakeholder register and trying to understand how to put themselves in their shoes. And I think that's really key here, and I appreciate you articulating that. Very, very valuable conversation that we're having here. Do you have any specific examples of stakeholder management and how it can go awry?
Oh, for sure, yeah. The two that come to mind for me both have to do with water. One is the Source Water Protection Overlay District that we worked on in Ferguson Township when I was the vice chair and then the chair. And then another which was started when I was the chair, and it was completed after my term, and that's a stormwater impact fee. Okay. So, and these are, because of their technical nature and the sort of environmental planning, land development related nature, definite they are very close neighbors to solar development. Right. So I think it's probably applicable in some way. So the Source Water Protection Overlay District is a piece of zoning legislation locally where an overlay district is basically, just imagine that you have your map, right? And then what you do is you identify an area within that overlays on top of existing zoning to do something else, right? In this case, it's to protect source water. Ferguson Township has quite a lot of the literal headwaters of the Chesapeake Bay.
Right.
Okay. And a huge amount of groundwater moving through it because of the karst geology, so limestone and dolomite.
Right.
And then we have a ridge over here, Tussey Ridge, and a lot of water comes down, percolates in, and the two most productive well fields are just past the Ferguson Township boundary. Those wells feed the State College Borough Water Authority, which provides water to tens of thousands of people every day.
Right.
So, from a protective and economically sensible long-term investment, ecological, human health, and economic standpoint, makes sense for us to create this zoning overlay. Well, it can pretty easily run afoul of the sentiments and attitudes of, farmers. We have a lot of ag land, right? Huge amount of ag land in Ferguson Township. And we have, I think, the second most agricultural easements of any municipality in Pennsylvania.
Wow.
So it's important to our culture. Farmers are farmers, and they're like, wait, you're going to regulate me? How? What are you doing? And it almost didn't matter what we did, because when it started, and here's the stakeholder engagement problem, the manager at the time that this was initiated, who was in his last 2 years, a year and a half as manager, did not include a farmer on the basically the technical planning committee to consider the overlay district. There was someone from the ag conservation field. The person's not a farmer.
Right.
And so the farmers, rightly, were mad. Now, I will say that one of the other board members and I actually put a motion on the floor for the Board of Supervisors, which is 5 people, by the way, to include a farmer. We two voted for it and went against the manager. The other 3 did not, and so they ignored us. 2 years later, when we were considering the first draft of this thing, who showed up in large numbers, complaining? And it was because they were left out. And I remember looking at my fellow board member who had voted with me, and I said, it sucks to be right.
Yep.
You know? And so that kind of engagement, it was the lack of engagement. Then what they were able to do then was they proliferated all kinds of disinformation, all kinds of things that were not true, but it was because, in part, the township, I voted against it. Didn't matter. I'm part of the township. We had ignored them.
Right.
Don't do that.
Right.
Don't do that. Take your time, check your homework, make sure that you have the right assignment, right? And so I'll just leave it with that example. The stormwater impact fee is another, but you can see, you can just imagine that could have been, a solar ordinance that made it possible for it to be the primary use, not just an accessory use, in all ag land, and that farmers would have been like, whoa, no, you're trying to take our land away. Right? So you need to think about that kind of stuff.
Right, exactly. So tell us how you've seen the sustainability field change over the years.
Yeah, it's changed in a number of ways. So there are, one, climate change is now basically a mainstream issue.
Right.
And people are overall much less divided on it than the loudest deniers would have you believe. Only 7% of the population, according to the Yale Center on Climate Change Communication, only 7% of people are outright deniers. They are also the loudest people, except for a segment of the alarmed. So there is still the bipolarity here, but the deniers and the reluctant are fewer and fewer. So that's a big change, and that's, I think, really good news. To go back to the very first thing that I talked about, other things are that a lot of sustainability for decades was either super technical, ultra, it's all atmospheric science, or or super engineering, and there's still obviously an awful lot of that, awful lot. Or it was a bunch of greenies who were so impractical, and it's like Ecotopia the novel, which isn't very good, and I don't suggest anybody actually read it. But this kind of, for lack of a better term, kind of airy-fairy utopian, like religion, And there were people in between, and but what's happened now is that the artists are all super involved, musicians are involved. We see it. You can watch a movie like Black Panther or Infinity War. The Marvel movies are movies about population, energy use, energy development, materials. I mean, the things that we get really into in sustainability, they're all over the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Right.
And that is very different from 15 years ago. Certainly from 30 or 40 years ago.
Right.
So I think the way that it's worked its way into popular culture is really interesting. Then I would say that two really interesting demographic things in the United States are fascinating. One is that because sustainability has a care ethic really strongly imbued in it, and that the ethic of care and the approach of care has traditionally been feminine, or that women occupy care positions, nursing, teachers, et cetera, that sustainability has offered women a way to advance. And because sustainability is politically, professionally much more gaining a lot of momentum, women are launching into leadership in sustainability in an absolutely awesome and truly inspiring way. And that as women occupy and come to be elected, in local office, I mean, we had in the center region here, we had a record number of women and women of color elected to office. And all of them were very articulate about issues of and approaches to sustainability. I find that just awesome. And dominated organization now for the last 7 or 8 years, so I'm kind of acclimated to it. But it's a really new thing for a lot of people, and I think it's pretty exciting. The other thing is environmental justice. So in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, obviously the racial reckoning that we're having in the United States again is super live. And I'm not going to diagnose all of that, I understand that people here may have different views on how that's supposed to go. Nonetheless, the reckoning is here, and we're being forced to talk about it. And professionally, civically, and publicly, that's meant that environmental justice that is ever more important, and it's being included in legislation. Last year, I worked with my environmental justice interns at Penn State, who I've been working with for 3 years now, to bring Dr. Robert Boehlert, the father of environmental justice, to Penn State for the colloquium on the environment. Now, it was online. It was the most well-attended colloquium on the environment we have ever had, easily. More than Bill Nye, more than, David Suzuki, more than, I think, Katharine Hayhoe. I mean, it was incredible. Paul Hawken, so that's, I think, also, it's inspiring for me. It also really shows us something about our culture, and that how sustainability getting woven into just about everything at this point, which is the last point, it's getting woven into everything. That means that with these other really big issues about who we are as a people, who works where and what they do, and who leads. And that's changing. And as long as we're thoughtful and dignifying, as I said, we're doing the right thing.
Excellent. So, how should our prospective project managers approach the projects they are undertaking this course, as well as in their professions? Are there any guiding principles that you think solar project managers can take from the current state of the business?
Sure. And I should say, I don't work at, as I've already said, I don't work at a solar development firm. I'm not an energy services consultant. Because I work at a university and in local government, the pace of my work and its focus is different from what you'll hear from some other people. So that's just me being mindful.
But you're a stakeholder
Definitely,
you know, and a potential client, and a lot of other things. So this is the I mean, the students here will hear from developers. And we'll probably work for developers, and we'll have developers in their ear as they do this work. They need to hear from folks who have been through it on the other side, as you have. So
yeah, no, that's great, and thanks for articulating that perspective. Sure. Yeah. Right. So you have to build trust. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Be clear, be factual, and be assertive in your communication. When I say be assertive, I'm not saying like get up there and puff your chest. Actually, that's like not assertive communication. Right. That's sort of like hubris, and like I don't like working with that guy or gal who like wants to get up and puff and be like, yeah, well, then I'm awesome. Like, okay, can I go work with someone else, please? Right. Like, it's just irritating to me. And this coming from someone who is not, isn't allergic to his own ego. Right. But, just know what you need and what your team needs, and communicate that in a respectful, honest way. And always, always, always talk to the person or people you're talking with the way that you want to be talked to, the way that you think that your grandmother should be talked to. Just, live into that kindness and respect. Be open-minded, but not so open-minded that your brain falls out, right? Trust but verify, as Ronald Reagan used to say. He wasn't the first person, of course, to say it, but, you have to have that trust, but you also need to be able to say, okay, I need to be skeptical and open at the same time. That's always a balancing act, takes practice. And just, if you want to get into the logic side of that, Carl Sagan's The Fine Art of Baloney Detection is really, really good for sort of locating logical fallacies. But then your attitude has to be one of openness, and that goes back to the trust building. Mind the community in which you're working. There in other projects that I've seen go awry, actually in a neighboring township here, Potter Township, a big national, actually international solar firm had proposed a 20 megawatt project on a farm in Potter Township, went over like a lead balloon. They had not engaged and dignified the community. Right. And quite frankly, they pissed off the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission, except for a super passionate like solar person who just wanted the solar but didn't have nice things to say about them. So once again, dignify the community, not just the individuals, right? Think about things that way. And I would include in that the land, the water, right? Aldo Leopold's The Land Ethic is a really beautifully written essay. It's 70-ish years old at this point. But we are part not just of the human community, but we're part of a community that is larger than ourselves. And that's true for most of us, whether we believe in, a traditional God or not. Right. We are a part of that, and it is a part of us. Right. Yep. And then the last thing is that you need to be accountable to your team, and your team needs to be accountable to you. Right. Say what you're going to do, and then do what you said you were going to do. Right. And if you have to change it, just do what you need to do to communicate that. Right. And that can include, I'm really worried for good reasons. And I guess along with that, like just as like don't let your anxiety take everything over. Right. Just because you're worried doesn't mean that there's actually a calamity about to happen. Right. I've been part of a solar education initiative that was almost sunk because of one person's super intense anxiety. They ended up, the others of us were able to kind of maneuver around them by being accountable to each other, by being kind, by staying focused, like all those other things, and just let that person go. Right. So, but anxiety can be a killer.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No,
So
no question about it.
So I guess I'll just say build trust, be open-minded, but not so open-minded that your brain falls out.
Right.
Mind the community and dignify it, including the land, and then be accountable to your team and hold your team accountable.
Great. Those are great principles, and I really appreciate you articulating them. And this has been a great talk. I've really enjoyed it and learned a great deal. Tell us how students can learn more about your work and how they can keep up with you and what's going on at the Sustainability Institute.
Sure. So the Sustainability Institute's website is sustainability.psu.edu.
Okay.
So you can go there. We have a newsletter called Mainstream.
Okay.
So if anyone wants to, follow what the Institute is doing, and really it's sort of all of Penn State sustainability news that's put out every, couple weeks.
Okay.
So there are those two things. If people who are interested in me, I'm Dr. Conviviality on Twitter.
Okay.
Dr. Conviviality. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm not a super regular poster to LinkedIn, but you can follow me there. And then online, I have buckforpa.com, and that was you can look at what I've done. That has to do mostly right now with my run for the State College Area School Board, because I was just elected to the school board.
Great. Well, congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
Congratulations. It's great. Thanks so much for your time. I really enjoyed this, Peter. I learned a great deal. Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much, Mark.
All right.